Hotep, and welcome once again to another edition of Community Cop. My name is Noel Lita, one of the co-founding members of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. I'm here today with my co-host, Michael Graves, aka Big Mike.
Namaste.
And we'd like to welcome you, our viewing audience, to another informative, exciting program where truth and real talk occurs. Julian, of course, won't be with us today. He's on Community Cop assignment. And, we'll try to maintain until he comes back, as is customary. We want to talk about a historical piece. And Michael, today we want to talk about the 13th Amendment of the Constitution was enacted on January 31st, 1865. Of course, the 13th Amendment was the one that eliminated slavery. Why don't you remind our viewing audience about the presentation to the 13th Amendment presentation to the Congress?
Yeah, that was extremely significant, and it was a reflection of the Black soldiers who were fighting ad nauseum and winning the war for the North. So in turn, this legislation was put into effect, and then later in April, when it was officially enforced. But the legislation came down 131, it was officially enforced after the South surrendered in April. So it's significant. And one thing that we have to understand is that dates like 1231, which was New Year's, what churches commonly call watch night. The history of it was not just to huddle and to pray. That history had revolved around seeing would the next day, that next morning, would they be free? So there has been a perversion with respect to what watch night really is. I am not against praising God. Praise God without cease. Do it as much as you humanly possibly can. However, the significance of watch night was not simply just for prayers, or unless your prayers are to thank God for the freedom that was about to be bestowed on you. But just to make it a gathering for prayer is not true to what it originally was. It was, in fact, to be watchful. That's why it was watch night, because you're watching to see was the white man's word in his bond that y'all are going to be free the very next day. And we found out that it wasn't. It wasn't until the Black men fought that good fight, well over 200,000 strong, that fought that war and brought us the freedom that we richly deserve.
Right, okay. And also, as some of our viewing audience may know, legendary Hall of Famer Hank Aaron made his transition this week. He was a baseball player who broke Babe Ruth's record for home runs. At the time, he received a lot of threatening phone calls and letters, and his family was threatened because some whites didn't want a Black person to be the home run king of baseball. Some of them, of course, hold on to the fantasy that as it relates to sports, that white people are automatically supreme in that area. So Hank Aaron, he was successful. He talks about that a lot, that being a very stressful time in his life. Of course, he was a baseball player. He loved the game of baseball. He's seen baseball as a sport that brought families together. So it was a complete shock to him when he began receiving so many death threats. They was basically telling him, do not hit more home runs than Babe Ruth, which was pathetic. He was successful. He did receive a lot of support from fellow players. But he made his transition this week. He'll always be remembered as a pioneer and one of the greatest baseball players. As I said, he's in the Hall of Fame, but rest in peace to our ancestor and gentle giant of a man, Hank Aaron.
Yes, sir. He was a real gentleman. And because I could not hold my composure and to always speak in terms of hope like him, I give it to him. He typifies the Southern Black gentleman to the core. His belief in God must have been awesome. to hold things the way he composed himself. When you think of, you have children, grown children that are in school that you have to pay bodyguards to secure. You have a child in college that is constantly being guarded by security that you have to pay for. So we have to just look at Hank Aaron as phenomenal to have the focus where he could actually hit that 715, because the mark was 714 by Babe Ruth. So he did it the first game of that season. He was resolute in that we're going to end this right now, because I'm not going to go through another year of all of these threats that I better not hit 715. So he hit 715.
He's sitting on 714. Here's the pitch by Downing. Swinging. There's a drive into left center field. That ball is going to be out of here. It's gone. It's 7:15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron. The fireworks are going. Henry Aaron is coming around third. His teammates are at home plate, and listen to this crowd. A sellout crowd is cheering Henry Aaron, the home run king of all time. 7:15.
First game of that season. And when he did that, what they're not discussing is that when he did that, Bowie Kuhn, who was the baseball commissioner, walked out of the stadium. That they are not admitting to. Bowie Kuhn, the commissioner of baseball at that time, got up while some people were cheering, turned around and exited the stadium. This is the same thing that Hitler did with respect to
Jesse Owens.
Jesse Owens. When Jesse Owens started kicking Germans behinds in race after race, Hitler got so frustrated that he got up and turned his back to the actual field of play. So Bowie Kuhn did the same exact thing to Hammer and Hank that day. And they don't talk about that now, but he was so frustrated. He didn't want it to happen. White folks didn't want it to happen. We have never seen that type of rancor over a baseball game. But they all came out, and they won't admit it now, but at that time, it was more white people against. I know he was playing in Atlanta and before that Milwaukee, but anywhere he went, there was death threats, and baseball paid for the security for him. He had to pay the security for his children. And it's a damn shame, but they will all act like the records don't matter now because Barry Bonds is the home run king. But I put Hammer and Hank, which he was known as, I put him right there in the top three of all time. Him, Willie Mays, and Barry Bonds are the three greatest baseball players of all time. Now, I'm not taking nothing away from the Negro Leagues. They didn't get to show their wares, and Josh Gibson and people like that. They were older when they came. Satchel Paige, they were older, but so much credit. And I'm glad you mentioned Hank Aaron because he deserves it. He's in the top three of all time. Take your pick who you want to pick. But those are the three best baseball players that ever lived, with the possible exception of Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson. So big ups to Hank Aaron, and we miss, such as you called him, Noel, a gentle giant.
Right. Okay. Fast forward into what happened recently. Many of you may know President Biden has taken his oath of office. We can now say President Biden, and lo and behold, on his first day of office, some of you may know that he signed 17 executive orders. We'll talk about some of the nature of some of these orders, but it was supposed to be a response to the COVID-19 pandemic and his administration's response to the pandemic, but also it had other documents or orders inside there. But one of the things that caught me by surprise, some of you may remember, because we talked about it on this program, how when Joe Biden made a secretive meeting with selective civil rights leaders, they requested that he sign executive orders as it relates to criminal justice reform. And a secret tape of that meeting was leaked out to the press. And when that request was made to Joe Biden by some of these Negro civil rights leaders, he barked back at them and made a statement that he's not going to violate the Constitution by executing executive authority by executive orders. He kind of hinted that he was against operating in that fashion.
There's some things that I'm going to be able to do by executive order. I'm not going to hesitate to do it. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to do what used to, Benita, you probably used to get angry with me during the debates when you'd have some of the people you were supporting say, on day one, I'm going to executive order to do this. Not within the constitutional authority. I am not going to violate the Constitution. There is a Constitution. It's our only hope. Our only hope. And the way to deal with it is where I have executive authority, I will use it to undo every single damn thing this guy has done by executive authority. But I'm not going to exercise executive authority where it's questioned, where I can come along and say, I can do away with assault weapons. There's no executive authority to do away with that. And no one's fought harder to get rid of assault weapons than me. Me. But you can't do it by executive order. If you do that, next guy comes along and says, well, guess what? By executive order, I'm going to say everybody can own machine guns again. So we got to be careful. I know you all know this.
And of course, we know Donald Trump used executive orders to introduce a lot of his backwards thinking orders and laws and administrative directives. So Joe Biden initially, at least as it relates to this group of selected Negro civil rights leaders, act as if he was offended by, and he didn't want to operate by executive orders. Well, lo and behold, he did sign on the first day of office 17 executive orders, none of which at that particular time was directed at anything to the population that everyone knows got him elected, being the African-American community. If you remember at that Negro meeting, they wanted him to pick a Department of Justice head that had some civil rights background. They made a request to him. Of course, he had wanted Merrick Garland, who was a judge and had a prosecutorial background. They wanted somebody who had a civil rights background. Of course, so they petitioned for him to either pick an African-American or somebody who had that particular background. He didn't. He shunned him. He picked Merrick Garland. And Merrick Garland, when his name was put before, for Supreme Court considerations, a lot of blacks had problems with him. It was under President Obama. A lot of blacks criticized his choice because of his background. So Joe Biden smacked the African-American community by making such a choice. And, some people may not, it may went over their head. He actually announced his choice of Garland the day after the riot at the Capitol building. So he kind of slipped it in. I guess he thought it was the best strategical time to make this particular announcement because he knows members of the African-American community and the civil rights leadership wanted a pro-civil rights person for that particular choice. And also they made a request for him not to pick Tom Vilsack. You may remember Tom Vilsack was an individual who terminated the employment of a sister named Shirley Sherrod in 2010. This is a white group that came with this doctored tape and accusing her of being a racist against white people. Mr. Vilsack terminated her employment. She had a very good reputation with the community. She was the agricultural secretary at the time. She was very progressive in getting not only blacks monies, but whites as well. She had a across the board fair history and reputation. But because this doctored up tape was presented to Tom Vilsack. He prematurely terminated her appointment very disrespectfully without even hearing the complete version of the tape that was presented to him. And the community was very critical of him. And lo and behold, who's Joe Biden picked for the agricultural secretary? The same individual. So that's another smack in the face. So our community has great cause to be concerned. And I know many people who support Joe Biden just like to, look over, what he's done in these two particular examples. And I stated, when you looked at the executive orders that he signed, it was heavy on the LGBT community. It was heavy on immigration, and it was very weak and nothing there for members of the African-American community who, as I stated earlier, was responsible for getting him elected. Now, Michael, is this a good start?
It all depends what's your vantage point. So I'm going to use a term you've been using. If you're a Negro, it's a great start. If you're an unapologetic Black man, then you see it as it is, and it's terrible. It's betrayal. Here you have one, as you mentioned, the agriculture secretary who fired Sherrod. The thing was, he had a problem with her relationship with Black farmers.
Right.
That was his problem with her. So he used that as an excuse when the right-wing Republicans came to him with a doctored up tape that everybody knew was false. So he used a false flag operation, took advantage of that, and dismissed her. Where was the fight from Black folks? Why didn't Obama step in and tell him, wait, she stays? He didn't do that. So the thing is, the problem is that Biden knows them. See, if he didn't know them, he would weigh their concerns.
Right.
But he knows the civil rights leaders. All they want is to take advantage of corporate money that comes in. They just fronting. They don't make real demands. They just make suggestions. You suggest something, and I consider it, and then I say no, and I put in who I want to put in. That's what Biden did with them. So Merrick Garland, all he in 14 egregious documented cases around police brutality, 10 times he weighed in with the police officers. 10 times out of 14. And the other ones, he just did some window dressing. So he has consistently sided with bad shootings and murders of Black men, not armed, not in the commission of a crime. So I don't know why Biden is trying to pretend as if he will be good with respect to the Department of Justice. Yes, Obama wanted him to be on the Supreme Court, but this is a real bad move to have him over the Department of Justice, because the facts are, whoever is there, he's their boss. So when you go 3 steps down, there is a Black woman. When you go 3 steps down, there's a Black woman that has a civil rights history of doing things. There's a white woman under him, and then there's an Indian woman. So you can see this siding with Indians now that he has an Indian vice president. So it is a Black woman in the Department of Justice, but she's number 3.
And I don't know for the life of me why members of the African-American community continuously, consistently go for the okie doke. I mean, this appointment should be seen as a smack in the face. As I stated, when President Obama proposed he be selected to the Supreme Court, members of the African-American community resoundingly criticized him as a selection, because he has been heavy pro-prosecution, his entire career. He doesn't have a right. He doesn't have a history or record as a defense attorney or a civil rights attorney. So because this was allegedly one of the premier issues that Joe Biden, when he went around to the black church, when he went around to the black community, he'll always talk or mention criminal justice reform or the inequities in the criminal justice system. But by this election, it should be very telling that he's not sincere. Once again, political theater, we get lip service, but when we see, you can tell more by his actions. And this particular actions, when he selected this individual to head the Department of Justice, brothers and sisters, we're going to get more of what we've been getting, even through the Donald Trump administration. So this is a great slap in the face. Number one, when he said to the Negro leaders that met with him in that secret meeting that he doesn't want to rule by executive order, but yet when he gets into office, he signed 17 executive orders, meeting the needs and the concerns of communities that didn't put him in office, like our community, the LGBT community. Now that, he signed an order which allows them, transgender males, to participate in women's sports, to transgenders, to enter women's bathrooms. And, a lot of people were against that, but he's seen that as his priority. Like anything else, you can tell what is a priority to any person by some of the things that they do first. These groups, these communities was more of a concern to President Joe Biden than the African-American community, clearly, because they got immediate results from day one from President Biden. And anything else on that, Mike?
Yeah, you might want to also include that transgender can be in the military also.
Oh, right. Yeah, transgender.
And they can operate in the military without any reservations.
Right. And also he had a very, some strong actions via executive order for the immigrant community. There was a lot in there for them. And as I stated, time after time again, what we see emanating from the White House is specific legislation, specific activity directed to particular segments of the society. Whenever we make requests to individuals, we have to be a part of a larger plan for everybody. There's very rarely anything specifically to the African-American community, written specifically to assist us. Whenever you make those kind of requests, people start saying, well, I'm the president for everybody, not only for you. But yet we see these executive orders, we see these programs directed at particular communities and only that particular community, and no one ever has any problems. So, to all you Democrats, you have to open up your eyes to what's going on with this particular president. All right. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, an individual who had made threatening messages to her from Texas, threatening her life. Mike, I think he was arrested. Was he arrested this past week?
In Texas.
Why don't you remind our viewing audience, Alexandria Ocasio is known as being a very progressive legislature. She's to the chagrin of a lot of Republicans, the so-called right-wingers, and even some in the Democratic Party who think that she goes too far to the left. Very frequently criticize her, but she's been receiving some very serious death threats for her political position. Michael, why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, she feels that those death threats are par for the course, but Garrett Miller, he's one of the people, insurrectionists, seditionists, who stormed the Capitol building. While in the building, he was tweeting, he was doing selfies, and he was talking about how he wanted to get AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, wanted her. He really wanted her. He wanted to string her up, and he was unable to do it. But he also mentioned that he also wanted to kill a cop who earlier had shot a woman in defending the Capitol building. He said he wanted to string him up with a neat noose. So he was doing that, tweeting things about what's next. The Civil War is on, and next time I come, I'm bringing my guns. He made that crystal clear. So when he got back to Texas, somebody he knew showed those tweets and some of them selfies to the FBI. So they picked him up in Texas. But there's a lot of that, and they even went back and saw as early as January the 2nd, which is 4 days before he stormed the Capitol, he was already planning on it and talking about how he's excited to get over there. So in essence, that he's one of the few people who he talked about killing a cop. He talked about killing an elected official, but nobody's been charged with the death of a police officer yet. FOP, man, we still waiting. FOP, thin blue line, Blue Lives Matter. Where all them governors who put in these Blue Lives Matter laws all over the country, they're not outraged about a police officer being killed? Here locally, where's the PBA? Nobody said anything yet. Where's all these pro-military people? That's a former veteran who did time in the Middle East. So there you have it. One guy has been charged now federally with threats to kill an elected official. And I don't even think they even said anything about him threatening to kill that cop that shot the woman in the Capitol building.
And Michael, when you talk about an individual who articulates, such criminal desires, this is an individual who actually was part of the rioters, correct?
Yes.
So, not only him, but there was others, that was present at the Capitol building who potentially had similar intentions. And this is one of the reasons why it's so perplexing to those of us why the FBI and the federal prosecutors are not going more aggressively to prosecute these individuals. I mean, there's so much disruption that occurred. We had loss of life, of 5 individuals died, one being a police officer was murdered. We had the civilians obstructing the normal progression of the Congress and the Senate selecting the president of the United States, which is a big deal. You had destruction of property. And as you pointed out, you had individual with real nefarious intentions. They wanted to harm individuals. And who knows what would have happened if when they broke into some of the congressional offices, if the congressional individuals were there that they had objection to, what would have happened? Who knows what would have happened? So the seriousness from the prosecutors, federal prosecutors, is alarming. Just recently, the Justice Department announced that they were debating not prosecuting up to 800 people that participated in the riots. They claim that, if they prosecuted everyone, because, the pictures are there of many individuals, that they prosecute everyone, that it would swamp the federal courts. So what? The federal courts and the local, state, and city courts have been swamped with Black bodies and Latino bodies for decades. That's why we have over 2 million jail population. They said, many did not commit violent crimes yet, but they conspired with those that did. Those individuals who did commit violence, those individuals who did, destroy federal property wouldn't have been successful without the assistance of the crowd. They all acted in concert. If it was just 10 individuals who may have been the most violent, if they were just there by themselves, they wouldn't have been successful. It was the presence and the activity of the other individuals that joined in, that participated, that supported them, that made the police response inadequate. So, this decision by the Justice Department and federal prosecutors to consider not prosecuting everyone, when you had individuals, as you stated, Michael, who, had plans to do some serious harm to members of Congress that they objected to, is baffling. And to me, in my humble opinion, it only shows that there's complicity, not only with some of the police officers who were on both sides of the riot, but federal prosecutors and also federal judges.
Well, when you consider that over 200 plus federal judges have been appointed by the Trump administration, when you consider, and that's not even counting, Noel, the appellate division. I'm just talking about federal judges, federal prosecutors, and then appellate judges, the highest levels. So, it's an innumerable amount of judges we're talking about here that's spread out all over the country. Those are the ones that do not want Trump people hurt. White skin privilege is through the roof now. Now, it always was, so I don't want to make it sound like this is something new to us, white skin privilege. However, they're not even putting any shade on it. Right. When they talk about the difficulty in prosecutions, the potential clogging of courtrooms, what are they going to say next? They don't have enough room in the jails for 800 to 1,000 people. They've always had room for us.
That's right.
So this is just more of the same. White skin privilege. They are involved in a civil war amongst themselves, and they will not come to grips and admit that. So when Biden is acting as if he is more than willing to go across the aisle to Republican parties, you can't have calm, you can't have let's move forward when these crimes like this are being perpetrated. We're talking about real crimes. As a matter of fact, to have peace and tranquility, you must have accountability. That's first and foremost. You are accountable to your actions. You are accountable for any crime you commit. You can't commit crime after crime, vandalism, illegal entry, felony murder, threats against elected officials, doing all these things, and then turn around and say, well, look, let's have peace, which is what U.S. senators are saying now. Why don't we just have peace and tranquility, as if crimes wasn't created? It's 5 families that are grieving as we speak. You can't forget about them. And of course, the Republican Party has always been pro-law enforcement. There's a cop that's dead. There were other cops that was beaten with American flags and MAGA flags, Trump flags. So you can't turn around and say, well, let's all go home and forget about this and just start rewriting history and start out with a new chapter. No, you can't do that. There must be accountability, because we have always been held accountable, not only for our actions, we've been held accountable for anything that we say, because that's conspiracy. And they haven't even levied conspiracy charges on the Texas man who talked about killing a cop and his cohorts, all those that was with him. That's conspiracy, crystal clear.
And as we both stated, Michael, I mean, we're not talking about a group or mob rushing into a federal building, maybe in downtown Manhattan or maybe in some other state. We're talking about a mob that forced themselves on the Capitol building while members of Congress and the Senate were doing their responsibility in selecting the President of the United States. This crowd had the intentions of stopping that from happening, and they did. They were successful. Of course, they had to retreat and then they resumed later on. But the importance of what they did and the seriousness of what they did cannot be understated. That is why there should be vigorous prosecution. But as you stated, all of these individuals seem to say, okay, listen, we'll get the few most vigorous troublemakers, those who committed some of the most serious violations, and we'll just forget about the rest. And I believe that's what's going to happen. But Michael, you mentioned earlier, you talked about things such as insurrection and sedition. Well, Donald Trump, as some of us have learned, has plotted to overturn the election in Georgia by removing the attorney general and to place somebody that he thought he can get a favorable decision to overturn the election in Georgia, which he thought would give him or assist him in getting the victory. I mean, for the President of the United States to secretively remove an attorney general of a state because the attorney general found no fault with the electoral process, but because Donald Trump wanted somebody to find fault with it and reverse the results, he wanted to remove him and pick his own person. Talk about sedition, Michael. Talk about that plan by your former president.
Yeah, he plotted with an attorney in the Department of Justice, Jeffrey Clark. He plotted with him. This was all immediately after Barr stepped down as the AG. When Barr stepped down, Rosen became acting attorney general, which was handpicked by Donald Trump. However, he was not willing to go along to that degree, even though that was a Trump guy. He was not willing to go along to that degree. However, when Clark came to him and said, look, I'll push any button you want me to push, make me the attorney general, and Trump was willing to do that. However, when Rosen told his top staff, told all the top people, they told Donald Trump they were going to resign, all of them in one fell swoop would resign if he removes Rosen. Now, at the same time, what he wanted Clark to do, the plan was for Clark to go to Georgia and raise questions about the Dominion machine, those machines, and say that they have been corrupted. So Donald Trump lost votes. So if he could get the state legislature in Georgia to overturn the election, now the other states will follow suit that have Republican legislatures. And more Republican legislatures all over the country than Democrat. And we are under the impression that it's a national election. It is not technically really a national election. It's 50 individual elections going on state by state where they pick the electors, and the electors go to DC on a given date and pick the next president. So he was going to get a majority, and the majority of the legislatures and governors are Republican, was going to get them to overturn their elections enough so they would have to do it again. So that was the plan. That was his last straw to use, and Rosen wasn't on board with it. So Clark was on board with it. So that was the plot.
Well, there's now discussions. Of course, the Congress voted to
impeach.
Yeah, the Congress impeached him for these reasons and others. Now they've handed the papers over to the Senate. The Senate is now engaged in debate whether or not he should be impeached. Of course, many Republicans are stating, as you said earlier, Michael, he's out of office now, let's move on. What do you think as it relates to impeaching Donald Trump? Some suggest that because he's no longer the president, then you cannot impeach him. But when you look at the charges or the accusations that you just discussed, in his vigorous attempt all over the country to try to overturn an election, the results of an election, because he lost, in a country that's supposed to be the premier democracy on the planet Earth, when you have the president, the sitting president, engaged in such conspiracy to overthrow the people's vote, what do you feel about the Senate, and should we just move on, or should they actually entertain and impeach him? Of course, he's not in office presently, but the ramifications are stated to be that if he is impeached by the Senate, that he will never be able to run for political office again. Some suggest that he has intentions of running for president in 4 years, and then he would lose a lot of the gratuities that a former president would receive if he is impeached. What are your thoughts on that? Should we just let bygones be bygones?
Well, I believe that America says it is a land of law, not of men. Consequently, they are being contradictory to the Constitution if they said let bygones be bygones. Now, Republicans have a reputation as being pro-law enforcement, pro-law, pro-Constitution, hardcore when it comes to original intent of the so-called founding fathers. How now do they turn around and all of these safeguards that's in the Constitution to check that type of behavior? How do they now dismiss it and just say, well, for the betterment, for peace and tranquility, let's just allow bygones to be bygones. That's hypocritical. The law is the law. If you're going to get mad at a former president who had extramarital affairs, you know, Bill Clinton, outside of his marriage, and because he tried to lie about it in front of congressional constituents, and you make that an issue to impeach him because of that, and now you got somebody that's actually calling the Attorney General in Georgia saying you can't get me 11,780 votes.
Right, exactly.
Come on. That's what he's saying. Come on. He said you can't find me 11,780 votes. And he's telling them this won't be good for you. That's a veiled threat. You're threatening the Attorney General in the state of Georgia. And that was in a phone call. That got out. So what does he have to do for the Republicans in the Senate to say enough is enough? You have to be punished for that. So, you know, if you're not going to do that, what does he have to do? Does he have to do what he said he could do? Walk down Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and he'll still get votes? Does he have to do that?
Excellent point. And when he made that comment, he was directing that to his supporters, civilians. Now you have legislatures in the Senate who evidently that same principle could apply to them. And that's a very dangerous scenario. And as you stated, Michael, in the past, they've alleged to be so pro-justice, so pro-prosecution. But, you know, as you stated, what else does Donald Trump have to do, you know, to move them to say, okay, enough is enough? All right, I want to go back real quick before we talk about the inauguration, Michael. I know there's a big piece you want to talk about on that. I want to talk real quick about Joe Biden's executive order. You know, we talked about day one, how he took care of other communities, did nothing for the African-American community. Well, today he signed what he considers or was been announced to be a criminal justice, some criminal justice reforms via executive order. I find them lightweight at best. Of course, one of them was to eliminate privatized jails. That's a good step. That should have never occurred, but that has nothing to do with, or we'll have to see whether or not that has anything to do with the prison population, because whether they're in privatized jails or state runs jails, you know, in my humble opinion, there's too many people incarcerated, especially for nonviolent trivial crimes. But all right, ending private jails is a good step. And also he signed executive order demilitarizing police departments around the country. Under the Trump administration and previously before under George Bush, police departments around the nation have received military equipment that was no longer being used by the military. And we talked about it on this particular program. The objective of the military is to destroy, is to conquer. So they have weapons and equipment designed to help them to be successful in those objectives. The objective of a law enforcement agency, which is a paramilitary unit, is to save and protect lives. You know, so we have two different objectives. So the equipment definitely has to be different. You know, police officers are not in communities throughout the country and dealing with civilian populations. Their objective is not to destroy and conquer. You know, their objective is the number one priority of a police officer is to preserve and protect human life. So having this equipment was definitely unnecessary and it should have never occurred. So he eliminated that. That is also a good thing. But he went far short of with a whole lot of other problems that we have in regards to the violation of human rights by police departments, the police murders. When you look at the double standard of justice and as it relates to prosecutors and judges, sometimes many times black receive harsher penalties, the heavy-handedness by what our community has dealt with. But he did say that he sent an order for his administration to review programs and deliver action plan within the next 200 days, announcing steps on criminal justice and police reform. Now, as it relates to the LGBT community, he enacted executive orders that specifically resolve some issues with them, and as it relates to immigration as well. But, you know, as it relates to criminal justice reform, he wanted his department heads to get back to him within 200 days, and we'll see. I know it's just going to be lip service. I know whatever they present is going to sound good, but it's not even going to be, like pure substance. Michael, are you impressed with your standing president, Joe Biden?
No, not at all. I think you hit it out of the park. I think you've covered all the bases. Certainly, it is just political theater at best, and he's just doing what it takes to keep Black folks quiet. So it'll be more the same. I don't see him in substance any different than I see Donald Trump.
All right, maybe symbolic difference, but no substantive difference.
Right, symbolism is about it.
Right. All right. As it relates to the inauguration, President Joe Biden and Kamala Harris was inaugurated into office. This was a very unique set of circumstances because of the coronavirus. Many people couldn't participate, but it was televised. And Michael, you wanted to make mention of a portion of the activities that occurred during his inauguration. There was a young lady who gave a poem. You wanted to make some comments about her poetry.
Yes, I want to talk about the poem and how she was selected. First of all, her name is Amanda Gorman, and she was on National Youth Poet Laureate. And she was also United Nations Youth Delegate years ago. So she has demonstrated her talent and skill. But I want to just question the words she used and why Jill Biden, the wife of the current president, selected her to be the poet laureate.
Our gaze is not to what stands
well, let's look at
between
it.
us.
She says America is committed to all colors.
We close the divide.
She says we seek harmony to all.
We must first
we lay down our arms
aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another.
America has never laid down its arms. Never and never will. Not only that, America or the white man anywhere does not lay down his arms until everything around him is dead. When they're on a battlefield, they will kill everything in sight, and then there is a laying down of arms. Only when all enemies are dead, when their president accounted for dead, will they lay down their arms. So I don't know what she was talking about when she was talking about we seeking harmony and we will lay down our arms. So she went further. She said, as we grieve, we hope we will never sow the seeds of division. That sounds like a slave to me. We grieving and hoping at the same time, and we won't sow seeds. In other words, you beat me, you kick me, you stab me, you shoot me. I'm not gonna do it back to you, no matter what you do. I'm gonna grieve and I'm gonna take it, but I'm not gonna return the favor of a rope, of a knife, of a gun back to you. I'm gonna be your dutiful servant, no matter what you do to me. That's a slave mentality. So I had a problem with some of the things she said. She said, we seek harm to none. Well, why don't somebody ask President Gaddafi's family, was there any harm distributed? Why don't they ask people in Cuba all these invasions over the years? Why ask Grenada, was there harm done? Ask Iraq and Afghanistan. Ask them, was there laying down of weapons? Was there love and concern and peaceful conversations? Ask them that. Ask the people that are right now on high alert in Iran. Does America lay down its arms? This is all a slave mentality. You know, you talking about buck dancing. She took it to a whole nother level. Let's look at some other things she said. Victory will lie.
We've seen a force
in the bridges we lay. We make democracy
would destroy our
delivered.
country if it meant delaying
It cannot be
democracy.
defeated.
And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated.
What democracy? The Honorable Elijah Muhammad called for freedom, justice, and equality, not for democracy. Malcolm called America's democracy hypocrisy.
Right.
Even Gandhi, when they talked about democracy to Garvey, he said, as far as Americans, that's an interesting concept. In other words, it's just a concept, democracy and freedom here. Ask George Floyd, ask Michael Brown, do you have true freedom? Do you have the status of freedom in America? Ask them that. Ask Eric Garner. In plain sight on tape, 8 police officers end his life. Not even a trial. The prosecutor from Staten Island is now in Congress. Wouldn't even try them. So what is she talking about? I'm wondering what world is she living in? Now she's from California. Look at all these egregious cases that happen in California. Where was she at? What world is she living in? This is hypocritical for Jill Biden to put her in that position, and she just shows you she's nothing more than a mammy. I mean, this was just ridiculous for her to do that, and I'm gonna move fast because we need to end. She said that the Biden administration is a new chapter in American history. Really? What about the chapter on the crime bill, 3 strikes and you in? He voted to have Grenadians killed. He voted for sanctions against Cuba that kills people. He voted for the death of Muammar Gaddafi, who was a good blessing to Africa.
That's right.
So what new chapter is she talking about? So I'm just saying, for the record, we need to select our own. So we should not go by what they're doing now, promoting her as if she's Frances Cress Welsing or Sada Shakur. No, she ain't that. She's not a Pam Africa. She ain't that. She's just what they want her to be, not what we need her to be. Talking all these flowery words, and we've gone at massacre after massacre after massacre, all of the states here in America. So I say to you in ending, because I know we're getting close to that time, Black man, Black woman, protect the Black child, accept your own, and be yourself.
And I just wanted to add, to what you said, is many times when members of our community are selected to participate in such events, they somehow have to pretend that America is not America. They somehow have to ignore the suffering of their ancestors and the indecencies and the victimization and the oppression and exploitation that their own people experience. She's not the first. Evidently she's not going to be the last that has to pretend. They have to get on the white side of history and act as if America hasn't been as brutal, hasn't been an enslaver, haven't been an exploiter, an invader, haven't participated in genocide. All of these things are crimes against humanity, And I remember, our good brother Ray Charles years ago during the 60s, when he sung his version of America, he talked about God shed his grace on America. This is a country that invested in so much death, the indigenous population, enslavement of Africans, and crowned thy good with brotherhood, in a time when segregation and racial oppression existed. So many times these artists have to ignore the reality that we experience, I guess, for the opportunity just to be pat on the back by individuals of the other community. But on behalf of Community Cop, I like to say thank our engineers and producers, Veronica Kitt, Nat Woods, Sheila Berry, and Big D. Can't forget about Big D. We'd like to thank you, our viewing audience, for watching. We see you next week.
No, we got time.
Oh, we got time.
We got
So,
another minute.
you take a couple of minutes, of the point that you brought up. Many artists, it's as if they see America for what they want her to be, as opposed to that of what she is. And in their rendition and in their words, they ignore the reality of what America is, what she has been, and what she's going to continue to be. 30 seconds, Mike.
She says, merging mercy with might. Love becomes our legacy. Well, tell that to Native Americans who was poisoned by General Amherst. Tell that to Native Americans who was systematically removed from one side of the country and had to walk on foot to another side of the country. All these butcherings, all these massacres that occurred by white soldiers on Native Americans. Tell them merging might with mercy. The generals are merciless. Colonels, captains are merciless. The Marines, only thing they know is to kill.
Right.
So what is she talking about? What world is she living in? Black people have been killed. Did you see that what they did in Ferguson? Are you kidding me? What they did in Baltimore? Militarized, they're gonna demilitarize those police departments. They only had 53 cops in Ferguson, but look what the weapons they had. She's in another world, and she's sick, and she's bewildered. She's out of her mind.
All right. Thank you for your opinion, Michael. All right, family, we'll see you next Tuesday. Those who watch the program on YouTube, we ask you to subscribe and like the videos so that we can keep going. Producers, continue doing the good work, and family, see you next Tuesday. Peace.
Interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens, but one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the wind-swept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.